Hey everybody,
Hey guys,
it's the IronTrap podcast BS session.
video thing. We still got to come up with a good name for this.
Yeah, we don't have a good name for it.
One of these years we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So this is the, if you're listening, obviously this is a podcast where we're just doing all kinds of stuff. We started out with interviews and we now started doing some BS sessions that people like. So obviously if you're listening, subscribe and you can get notifications when we have new ones coming up. If you're watching this or if you're listening and you're not watching, when we do the video portion, Mike usually drops in some visuals that makes it a little more interesting as well. You can watch that on our YouTube channel, which you also should subscribe to. So
Yes.
that's that. We're doing on this podcast, I guess we're discussing, we had a little bit of, I guess people were not excited. People commented saying they liked it, where we were discussing some questions that we get a lot, updates on cars and different things. Steve's one was very popular because everybody wanted to know about Steve. So
He's no longer the man of mystery. Everyone knows about him now.
hopefully everyone was shocked with all the exciting information that he gave us about his.
Yes. The very normal background that we all have.
Yeah.
He wasn't a bank robber in a previous life, unfortunately. It would have made for a great podcast clip, but
He just may have never told us.
skipped over that part of his.
Yeah.
So there was a 5-year gap in his work history.
Yeah. So in this one, we thought we would discuss some common Q&A stuff.
I feel like this is a pretty discussed question, not just between us, but on
In the
forums, in the hobby in general.
Everywhere you go, if you go to any type of old car show, swap meet, on the internet, on any of the Facebook groups, it's specifically the old guys, I would say.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you follow our stuff. There is a lot of people old guys and gals, I guess you should say, that are discussing the state of the hobby. The hobby's dying, the sky is falling, Hershey isn't what it used to be, it's terrible, and Carlisle sucks, it's not like it was in the 70s. And yeah, so we figured we'd discuss a little bit of that. We get asked every swap meet, a lot of times when we meet people, when we're traveling, they always ask us, what do you think of the hobby, or what's going on?
Every one of these podcasts, we're just trying to eliminate questions that we get in person. So we answered about Andrew, we answered about Steve. So now we're just covering the hard topics. We can just send you a link that just answers all of your questions.
You know what's going on now.
Yeah.
But we get that a lot. It's just,
Ton.
what do you guys think? Or I get people will come up to me quite often and talking about finding stuff, and they'll say, there's hardly anything out there. I can't find anything. I don't know how you guys find all the stuff you find, and that's talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Mike? What's the state of the hobby? What do you think about, what are you seeing as far as young people getting into it, or the crowd at shows and events?
So I don't think the hobby in general is dying, but I think what people are doing is just changing. Mm-hmm. Restoration is so expensive nowadays. It costs at least $60,000, just putting a very random number, to restore anything.
That's a low number.
That's what I mean. That's crazy low. It's probably closer to 6 figures to restore anything.
Yep.
So take Dad's Daily is right behind the camera. 47 Ford Coupe. That is not worth more than $25,000 restored. And that's on a good day.
Basically.
Yeah. So restoring cars is not a thing of the past, but you have to have some deep pockets or really, really want to restore said car to original to do that. Same with like the brass era stuff. I feel like there's not a lot of that being done because those cars are expensive to maintain, to rebuild, to run. Like, it's just the money. The hobby is not cheap enough to do that kind of stuff. Where building a hot rod or just building a car that's not restored is a little bit more cost effective for people in my age group. I'm only 33. I'm 33. And building a hot rod or building just something, a fun driver, is more cost effective for someone in my age group, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's where also to add on to that, the survivor, patina, whatever trend you want to call it, but people appreciating cars as found. We obviously do a lot of that here. A little different maybe, but you see a lot of that now I think that's where a lot of the younger people are gravitating towards, because it is so expensive to even just repaint a car. And that's another question we get all the time. Why don't you said literally today a customer randomly said that.
Literally on the phone selling him parts. And that was his last question before he hung up.
Yeah. Why don't you guys paint any cars? Even though I have a shiny car next to me, we have the Mercury, we have different cars that have been shiny. People always ask that, and I think that's why you're seeing that. It's so expensive. I've always gravitated towards cars with character. So I'll say that it wasn't always about the money for me, partially, but a lot of times the character is what's cool in a lot of these cars. So I'm maybe a little different, but I think as a whole, a lot of people, it's just the money. Like, to repaint, especially if you get into big stuff, 50s, 60s cars, they're so big. To repaint a 50s Cadillac or
even just the T, which is next to Matt,
Yeah.
and Dad's Daily, they're like 5 times the amount of square foot for paint.
Yeah.
And there's only 20 years between those two cars.
Yes.
So
I think that's one big part of it.
interior,
yeah. The whole step, every step, especially if you're paying someone to do any of the steps. Like, I can't do everything. I'm not able to do upholstery, or I don't want to learn. And paint work, I dabble in, but I'm not real good at it. So my response to a lot of people when the discussion about why don't you paint something, or we get comments and videos are like, well, at least just throw a quick coat of flat black on the car, or this or that, or just do a quick, enamel paint job on it. And my response in some of the comments is, I'd rather have a car that looks like a piece of shit because it earned its age than me do some half-ass paint job and it looks like a piece of shit because I don't know how to paint a car. So, like,
valid point.
I'd rather try and make a POS look better than it does than try and make my crappy paintwork look acceptable. So that's why I've always done that. If I'm going to paint a car, I want to do it nice. I want to make sure everything looks nice and it's a pretty good car. Now, it's not going to be America's most beautiful roadster, but I'd like to have something that's decent. I don't like that in between. If we're going to paint something, and I'm not a fan of the flat black thing, that's just like a half-ass flat black paint job over a car that has neat old paint, I think is a disservice. I think you might as well just leave it alone. Do it right or don't do it at all. So I never understood that. But I think a lot of people are gravitating towards the old paint and stuff like we're doing. And that's why I think I like showing in videos the ways that we've made cars that looked terrible. The Schroll Coupe, it was covered in black primer that was faded out, and we uncovered the original paint, doing the patch panels and then getting paint matched and blending the paint in so that the car has that cool age to it, but is not all rotted out now. So I think there's some ways you can work around it that it still looks cool, and the stuff is more accepted now.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that depending on the type of car and what it is, it's acceptable to have patina or age. So they have classes at like Amelia Island and different higher end shows that are, as found or barn find or even in the AACA they have like original class for original cars.
I think they call it Survivor.
The
Survivor class, I think, is what they call it.
And those vehicles, while they might not be as rough as some of the stuff that we bring back, those cars have age to them. They have chips in the paint. They're not some of those cars that compete. Totally okay. So if it's a Lincoln K model or it's a Duesenberg, it's okay to have a car that might and display it at a show with some age.
Yeah.
But because we have a 32 Ford, it's not okay. So I never understood that, where people like picking when it's okay to have age and it shouldn't matter. So I think that part of the discussion is kind of
silly.
Weird. Yeah,
Super
it
silly.
doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, we can all agree if you have a car that the door is literally falling off of the car, or it's so unsafe that you're going to fall through the floor, okay, that's a little more than, like the DeLorean Roadster behind me, like that car had no floor, it was totally rotted out. I took the body off, I fixtured it, I put a whole new subfloor in it, and the car is as solid as it was or more than new now.
Yeah.
But it still has that age to it. So that's where I think I would draw the line, is if it's unsafe. or if it's just so, if you can stick your arm through a hole in the car, that might be a little far down. But
and I don't think the hobby is necessarily dying at all. I think there's plenty of young kids getting into it. It's just the things that they are doing and intending is different from what has been shown for years. Dead Man's Curve is a perfect example. That show is insane. They do like 10,000 cars and like 10,000 people a day through the gates the last couple of years. That show is thriving.
Is it 10,000 cars?
Sorry, it should be 10,000 people. It's a couple thousand cars.
Right.
10,000 people a day. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're bringing 10,000 people each day
into the
show.
Walking through the gates. Yeah.
That show is out like growing every year. So I think the hobby isn't dying. Just maybe some of the shows that have been going on for so long have become stale, and they're not attracting as many new people as they should be because they've been doing the same things for 50 plus years. And kids my age may not be gravitating towards those shows because they're kind of older. And
I think you're seeing as a whole a shift in the sitting in the lawn chair behind the show all day long.
For multiple days in a row.
I think those shows have been declining. Or stuff that is super competitive, judging and kind of almost stuffy. I feel like a lot of younger, that's not super inviting all the time. I can't say that that's always it, but like it's a little scary to get into restoring a car and taking to a stuffy show that's a points, I shouldn't say stuffy, to a show where it's a little more serious where there's points judging, because it's like, it's kind of hard on your ego. You spend all this time and you bring a car and then somebody goes, oh, well,
the nut's not right.
Yeah, all that hardware is the wrong color, and you got beautiful paint, but we're gonna shit on the car because of this. So like, I think you have to be in the right mindset to do that, and if you are, then great. I have a lot of respect for that. But I think you're seeing a lot of people gravitate towards events that have a lot going on. So Dead Man's Curve and some of those types of shows where there's like bands and stuff, and it's more of a big party or a hangout session than it is a car show. Like, you rarely ever hear about the awards that are won. I don't even know if there's awards at Dead Man's Curve. I have no idea. But like, everybody talks about the stuff that was going on and the fun they had, rather than so-and-so won best paint or best gas or whatever. And you're seeing more driving events, and that's why, I think, and I think everybody can acknowledge it, that the Race of Gentlemen is what spawned a lot of these driving events. Now, there was events going on before the Race of Gentlemen that were very, that the Jalopy Showdown and different stuff like that was going, and other events around the country that were going on. There were nostalgia drag and racing and driving events. But I think the Race of Gentlemen, whether you want to talk crap on it or whatever you feel about it, it's very, people argue over it. It's crazy. You have to admit that show brought a lot of people into this hobby, and a lot of people started to want to do driving events or nostalgia drag race events and stuff like that. And I think that's helped bring a lot of this stuff up. So that's, to me, what seems to be the events that are like kicking off, or events that are more like a party hangout feel, or events that are like about driving the vehicle or racing the vehicle, or you're seeing a lot more of like people doing reliability runs with clubs. And I don't know, I've always been the person that's into like the smaller, more intimate show. Like for me, Dead Man's Curve it's a lot. I don't, that people always like, why don't you go to that show? Not that I don't think it's awesome. A lot of my friends go. It's just a lot. Like, so those huge events with tens of thousands of people and whatever's going, like, I sort of like don't.
We have a hard time at Hershey.
I'm just like, I like to sit in the back of the booth and just like.
It's a lot going on at Hershey, and then add bands and all these other different events going on. It's like chaos. It ends up feeling like chaos because there's just so much going on. Where like the Gilmore, Relics Riots at the Gilmore.
Yeah.
Much smaller, a little bit more relaxed, laid back. Everyone's just kind of hanging out. There's not 10 million people running around doing all kinds of stuff. Matt and I are both on that same wavelength.
Yeah, I'd like to. So that's how I've been, and I think you get that broken up. So I think that's why you're seeing like clubs doing reliability runs, and you're seeing these like small type events where it's like almost private. I don't want to say private, but like a bunch of people will get together and go on a cruise and hang out in an area. And it's not like, you don't see people giving flyers out at every event. They just want to go have a good time with their friends. And I've always said that for me, the way I like to enjoy these cars is driving to a buddy's place and hanging it out at his shop and just shooting the shit. Like that to me, or going to like a semi-private type picnic or open house at a shop and driving there is way more fun for me than like a huge, like a good guy show or something like that.
Ted's Auto Picnic is probably one of the funnest events we do all year.
Yep.
And all we do is drive 20 minutes down the road, sit in a big open field at a church, eat a ham and cheese sandwich for a couple hours, get in the cars, and then drive back. But it's the most fun. And like the guys that come to that show, a few of them only bring their cars to that show. And they bring out like, one dude's like this crazy Lincoln collector, and he only brings his cars to that show.
One of the few shows.
Yeah.
I mean, he does bring on the other, but like, of all the shows you could bring your vehicles to, there's guys that like, they do like a Hershey, and a couple other events, and then they do this picnic.
Random picnic on a Wednesday.
Yeah, so I think you're seeing a lot more of those events. So as far as the hobby goes with events, I really think that the guys and gals in Europe are actually doing as good, if not better, of a job than for some events than we are in the States. I think because it is a lot more difficult to do the types of cars we're into, there's not as much of it around, so they have to travel further, maybe for events. Like, we're spoiled. We could go any weekend of the year, half an hour radius or maybe an hour radius, and there's a decent-sized car event where they have to go. So, like, there's some events like in Sweden and different parts of the country where there's like these, looking at it online, it's like almost like a camping event. Like they're going and everybody's camping at a campgrounds or some picturesque place and hanging out, and it's just hanging out. It's not about, the awards you're winning and who has the best this. It's just everybody coming and hanging out. Maybe there's a dirt track and people run around. But I like that idea of it's more of a hangout type thing. And, like last year among our friends, I tested a little bit with like going to a local, the Mahoning Theater is a really old drive-in movie theater in our area. I think it's the only place in the country that still plays 8mm films.
Believe so,
or 9mm, whatever. And they just do vintage films, horror, all kinds of stuff. So like, I just texted a bunch of friends and said, let's do this. You could camp there. And we drove out and we took a back roadway, and it was like a 2-hour drive in back roads from my place. And a few of us got together. Steve drove his Nova. Our one buddy drove his International, his Scout. And like, not a ton of us ended up getting together, but it was like a neat thing to go watch the drive-in movie. And it was more about the driving and hanging out than it was winning awards, sitting behind a car in a lawn chair. Like, I think a lot of that's dying. Like, the people are just sitting in a lawn chair waiting for people to come to them and talk to them about their car. Like, I think a lot of that's changed where people want to just hang out and do whatever. So I think that the shows are changing, and that's what some of the people that are going to the same events they've gone to for 100 years is declining, because they don't realize that people are going to these new events or different events, and these shows aren't understanding that you need to change up what you're doing or the vibe to get more people to come out. So I think the serious judging type car shows, you're starting to see a decline in that, because a lot of people that are getting into the hobby don't care, don't.
They want to drive the car. And I think you're going to see a decline in the brass era, the early stuff, because you just can't drive it. It's hard to drive those on modern roads because they just drive so slow, and the cars are hard to maintain.
And people don't have a connection.
Yeah, all the people that would have owned them in their families are 2-3 generations removed. It's not a car their grandfather would have had. It's a car their great-great-grandfather, and there's literally no connection at all anymore.
There's no reason to own them. So I think brass era cars should be treasured.
Yes.
But I think that it's just, you see the market. You look at the market, a Model T is probably the most affordable antique car
It's wild.
that you can buy and get yourself into. Now, again, like Mike said, they're not super drivable, although some of the later T's can be outfitted to, you know. So I would say post brass era, they're a little more drivable, but still, it's not an easy thing to drive and maintain and have.
I mean, finding parts for any of those cars is like
if it's something obscure,
pretty tough.
But a Model T, everything's reproduced and made. But so I think you're seeing a decline and a shift, and that's why you're seeing the market is changing, and people that are in my age group that are in the 40s and 50s or late 30s, you're seeing the cars that we grew up around are skyrocketing in price. So all the stuff like we joke about on the channel, like I got into Volkswagens in high school in my early 20s and stuff. I was real heavy into it. The stuff I had is now like, I'm looking at the prices and I feel like the old guys I talked to about 32s where I'm like, I was buying those things for $50 and now it's like.
There's a bubble that literally follows every
generation.
Everything. So like I used to collect retro video games. That bubble follows a spike in value for when those people become like 30 or 40. You have disposable income. You're like, I had I grew up in the 90s, so 90s cars now are like insanely expensive because everyone has disposable income and they're like, shit, I want to buy one of those cars that I had when I was a kid. I miss it. So it's that same bubble and it just follows generations, and it's the 90s cars right now are crazy.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody at a cruise in this past weekend, and we were talking about Fox body Mustangs, and like I was aware that they're popping off and they're more valuable, but like this guy was talking about like how much like quarter glass was going for like with the Ford logo for a Fox body Mustang. He was like, it's $1,200 or whatever prices he was throwing. It was like, are you kidding me? And it's just I'm not exposed to it because we're in our little bubble of what we're into, but like that stuff's changing. So you're seeing more of that, but those cars from the 90s and 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, like all those cars, it's the same as what we're into. Most people are getting them because they want hot rodded versions, or they remember them because when they were younger, they had a, Mustang that they drag raced, and they might buy an original one just because it's neat. But like, you're seeing the same thing. A lot of people are into Japanese cars from the 90s, and they're getting cars and they're modifying them just like they were back in the day. So the trends are this. What people are doing is the same. The cars are changing. Yeah. So I think but people were complaining about like getting priced out of antique cars, and you see it on like Facebook. It's the worst on these groups. Are so toxic with guys that'll comment. Somebody's selling a 32 Ford, and guys will say like, that's you're the reason that the hobby's dying because you guys are asking so much money for your 32 whatever insert car, and even though the person might be selling the car for a reasonable amount of money or the market value, people are like freaking out. It's like 32 Fords have always been expensive. Yeah. Sure, there was more of them around that you could get a deal on one, and it's the same way I feel about the German cars I was into when I was younger. Like I could go and find a Volkswagen Rabbit or a Scirocco or a Beetle, or even I tell the story. I used to go to the Porsche swap meet. They have a spring Hershey Porsche swap meet every year that the Porsche Club has. I used to go every year when I was into German cars because I'd look to score cool stuff. And I remember seeing like POS 911s.
Oh my gosh.
And 912s that were like, for $10,000, I could buy one that was crappy but ran. And it's like, I look at the prices now and I'm like, if I was a smart human being, I would have been buying all those POS cheap 911s and any old Porsche that was cheap and just scroll them away because I'd be set. So
we got to start doing that early 2000s cars now.
I think it's already passed. People are already.
Dang it!
You got to start buying like, I don't know. I don't even know what we got to.
Yeah, but what's funny is people always talk about being priced out of the market. You never hear that with expensive cars. So like you don't hear anyone complaining about high-end Packards being too expensive and pricing people out of the market. Yes, you may not be able to afford a 32 3-window, but a two-door sedan is still very obtainable.
A Model A.
A Model A.
A Model T. Like
yeah, there's still ways to get into the early Ford hobby, but you may not be able to buy the best of the best. A nice done finished 3-window or a nice done finished Roadster is always going to be the most expensive early Ford.
It's the same with Packards. Like that's a really great example because I've been wanting a Packard for a number of years.
Our eBay watch is always hilarious. They'll just be like random 6-figure Packards pop up. I'm like, what are you watching this for? He goes, you never know.
I'm just watching to see what stuff's going for. just just daydreaming like
my
everybody.
goodness.
But like, you can buy an affordable 30s or 40s Packard that is the 6-cylinder or the base model. Let's call it that. I'm not as educated in Packards, so I don't want to say the juniors maybe.
It's the juniors and the 110 models, I believe.
Yeah, they're like more affordable. Has the same styling. You can get that. I mean, in the end of the day, if you're driving a Packard, the average person is impressed. They think I used to do that trick when I was younger.
It's a 6-cylinder? Ugh.
Yeah, the average person would do that. I always joke when I was like in my teens and early 20s, I used to buy, that was my trick. I would buy shitty old Mercedes and BMWs, and I would drive them around, and girls would think I was rich and I was something special, but it was a clapped out 70s or 80s like Mercedes that I bought for $500, and you pick a girl up, she's impressed because it's a Mercedes. It's dark out, they can't see the rust, and the seat sits crooked because it's rotted, but they're impressed. So Packards, going off course here, Packards are the same way, Fords are the same way. You want to get into an old hot rod, don't be pissed off because 32 Fords are expensive. They're what everybody wants. They're the 32 to 34s are the most desirable early Fords and hot rods. So don't be mad because they're expensive. A 32 Roadster has always been desirable and brought more money. It's just that they're harder to find now, and you're not going to find one of the born. Don't be pissed because you're a cheap ass. That's what it is. Like, you're a cheap ass. The market isn't too expensive. You're just a cheap ass. And I always try and remind myself of that. Like, I look at something and go, man, that's so expensive. It's like, it's not that it's expensive. I just can't justify the cost. And people are, especially on social media, are like they demonize somebody selling something for what they think is too much money. And it's like, if it's market value, it's market value.
Market value is market value is market value. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just following what things sell for. Yeah, I don't just I run our parts business. Yeah. I don't just pull numbers out of my ass. We go online and we do research and see what things are comparably selling for. And that's the market, unfortunately.
Now, if you're going to deal with me and you're trying to buy a car that isn't for sale, I'm going to pull a number on my ass that's probably too expensive.
Yeah. If you're dealing with Matt, there's probably a number just being pulled out of thin air.
If it's something cool that I don't really want to sell, I'm going to pull a number out of the air that's probably ridiculous because I want you to go away. I don't want to sell it. If it's not for sale, that's why. So I'm the grumpy old guy. But I think that's stuff that people are complaining about the market, and stuff's so expensive. You could say it about anything nowadays. You go to the grocery store, stuff's expensive. So don't shout about antique cars being expensive. Like, I've always been happy when the stuff I'm into is going up in value, because not that I buy any of this as investments, but it feels good that the hobby that you're in, the things you're collecting, are worth more money than when you bought them, or that they're worth the same money. So if you need to sell something, you're not losing money, you're at least breaking even or making money.
Perfect example is in the beer can hobby.
Okay.
All the dudes that got into it in the 70s, it was worth nothing. Everyone just traded between each other, and the cans there was some value, but not like now. The can hobby is now so ridiculous. There's stuff that's worth tens of thousands of dollars for a single beer can.
Which blows my mind.
It's mind-boggling. But people in these groups get upset because it's now expensive to collect the rare cans. But some of these dudes were collecting in the 70s, and they were dumping or just going to dumps and pulling cans out that are okay-ish, but they went from being worth $1 to some dumpers sell for $100. It's like the best investment you could ever ask for. Because some of these dudes just pulled their can collections off the wall and put them in boxes, and now it's becoming popular again. They're pulling them out, and they're like, wow, my can collection's worth $100,000. That would be a terrible thing to complain about.
You're like, man, this hobby's too expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive to get in to buy the ultra rare stuff, which is understandable. Every hobby's like that.
With anything. I mean, that's part of.
It just gives people something to complain about.
Yeah. So a lot of it, I think, is just perspective. If you're a negative person and that's how you're looking at things, then great. But I think you should try and look at yourself and what you value and the money you want to spend. And I think people that pay crazy money for a brand new car, spend 6 figures on a brand new pickup truck, totally crazy to me. Makes absolutely no freaking sense. But when I buy some stupid speed part to put on the wall, people think I'm crazy. So like, it's all what your perspective of what you think is where you value, what you value and where you value it. So,
and I think a lot of the people that are commenting on all this stuff are also I don't really know how to put it in a better way, but like they're weekend hobbyists. So they work a normal job. They're doing all this other stuff, and they're just seeing the hobby on the weekend. You know, wow, that part's crazy expensive. But they don't understand that that's the only one that's available at this time. So like us that do it full time, we're involved in it, and we see that this is the only one I've held in 3 years.
That's why it's
at
expensive.
A swap meet. This is the only one I've ever held in 3 years, and we have it for sale. That's why it's expensive. I understand that it seems crazy, but this is the only one I've seen in 3 years, and we go to swap meets all over the place. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, some of the people that are commenting on it, they just see it from the outside, not the outside looking in, but they're not as involved, I would say.
And a lot of times it also like to with that, like if you're complaining about the price, you can buy a fiberglass 32 or 34 or whatever, 33, you could buy fiberglass cars, and usually the people that are complaining about the cost aren't the people that would pay the money, like the care, I should say, not pay the money. Like I care that I have original type parts on my cars as much as I can, where that person probably wouldn't care. So you might as well just buy a reproduction body, because you don't really care in the end of the day, because part of the hobby for me and a lot of people into the stuff we're into is like the original stuff. It's the chase, it's the actual parts you're putting on the car, and the fact that the car feels a certain way because it's all old stuff. So you can go buy a fiberglass car and build it, and it's going to be that's why you can go buy a done 32 3-window fiberglass car that is like beautiful, and it's the cost of like a rolling 32 3-window project that's an original body. That's just how it is. The real stuff brings more money. So like, you shouldn't complain about that. It's just, again, you're too cheap, or you can't justify. I don't care if I offend people. Like, that's what it is in the end of the day. You're too much of a cheap ass, or you can't justify buying the real stuff. And if it means that much to you that you want the real stuff, then you would pay the money. So just buy a fiberglass car, buy a Brookville car. It's still fun. You could still be in the hobby. There's nothing wrong with it, but don't complain because the real stuff's bringing the money. It just doesn't make...
Yeah.
It's like, I want $100 bills, but I don't bitch that they are harder to get than a $10 bill. It's just what it is.
That's a good saying.
That's what it is. Bangers, throwing them out. Got 'em.
And since we talked about the car shows and everything and the hobby changing, I think swap meets are actually doing better than ever.
COVID helped that.
Yeah. And some tax laws, online sales stuff. Now, Hershey may be down a little bit because the people that vend at Hershey are of an older generation.
Yeah.
But Carlisle has been bigger than ever, I feel. There's been more people selling at Carlisle than in years past, pre-COVID. A lot of the swap meets, smaller swap meets that we go to, they've been getting better and better each year.
Yeah.
And you were just at Maple Grove 2 weeks ago, and it was slam packed.
Yeah, I did the Maple Grove swap meet, which has been going on for a very long time. But I feel like it's been steadily, it's just as big as I could remember as like a young person going, or it's growing, a little bit each time. But it's like, it's a pretty big swap meet, and they do like zero advertising. Like Maple Grove doesn't really advertise it. Like they're not out like handing flyers out. They have it on their website, but they're not like pushing it. And it's just a good swap meet. It keeps growing. And I think Hershey in some of the shows, Hershey is a little more difficult, where people are confused. They make it more difficult to become a vendor. Maple Grove, you just show, and even Carlisle, it's a little more difficult because you have to apply for a space. And like Maple Grove and some of these smaller swap meets, if you want to go the night before, you just throw some stuff in your pickup and you show up and you're there and you vend. Carlisle and Hershey and any of the AACA swap meets, even though they're better, you have to be an AACA member. You have to, Hershey in general is a little bit of a pain in the ass. I don't want to go off on that, but like I can renew my AACA membership online, but I still have to fill out a freaking card and mail a check in, and then watch my bank account to make sure the check got cashed.
And it doesn't happen.
It's very archaic. And that makes it hard. There's a lot more hurdles for a young person to have a swap space. And I'm not saying that Hershey needs to open it up to just people to show up with pickup trucks, but like you look at the swap meets that are doing really well, there's not as much of a commitment to go, so you're going to get more people to go. So I still think people should become AACA members. They should vend it at Hershey. It's the best swap meet there is. But I think that's why some of those swaps aren't necessarily growing. And stuff's changed. I mean, and like everybody, it's way easier to sell something on Facebook Marketplace now than to set up at a swap meet. So like in the 70s, there wasn't that.
Yeah.
You did a yard sale or you went to a swap meet. So of course they were going to be bigger because it wasn't as convenient. So people
and online made it even more convenient. I don't have to put pants on. I can sit at my computer in my pajamas.
We talked about this. You got to wear pants.
I sit at my computer in my pajamas and order something online, and I never have to deal with anyone. I never have to see anyone. It just shows up. But for us, for some people, the hunt is more fun than anything, and that's what we love, because when we put a car together, we share stories of, you remember where we got that? And that came from here. And I think that adds more fun to building cars for us.
I think you're seeing with buying and selling in the hobby also it's coming full circle, where it's becoming very expensive for sellers to sell things on the internet now, because now it's not like a yard sale where you don't have to pay tax. If you sell more than just a small amount of stuff, you're getting a 1099. You're also getting hit with all these fees, eBay, PayPal, Venmo. Everybody's got their hands in your pocket looking for their piece of the pie. And then the last couple of things are getting stuff that wasn't what you expected it to be. You buy something on the internet, it shows up, it isn't what you expected to be. It's a hassle to return it, or if the seller is not helpful. We deal with it all the time. We send good photos to customers of items. They might overlook a photo. They're very dissatisfied because
not look at the photos at all.
Not look at the photos at all. They get an item. They're not satisfied with it. They want to return it. It's a hassle for all of us involved. So if you go to and then the last thing I should say is the scammers on social media and marketplace and stuff like that is getting crazy. A lot of people, especially older people, are getting scammed with people doing these tactics to take your money with parts. They figured out that there's an urgency to buying rare parts when they're affordable, so they're preying on that. So they know that if they put up a 32 grill and it's $500 cheaper than it should be, we're all fighting over it, so we'll just send you the money without asking too many questions, not to get beat. So
how many times did you almost buy that chrome grill on Facebook?
Yeah, this chrome grill that I kept almost buying. I was like, maybe it's real. Maybe it's real.
Maybe it's real this time.
No. So I think people are going back to swap meets because you can hold it in your hands. You can pay in cash. The buyers can do whatever they want with the cash. If you're just selling this stuff for fun casually, then certainly you can treat it like a yard sale. You put the money in your pocket, you walk away. Obviously with us and bigger businesses, we have to do the tax thing because we have a proper business. But like if you're just the average Joe and you want to sell your extra parts left over from building cars, this stuff's worth a little bit of money. You get $10.99, and it's kind of a bummer. So,
and I think the best way for swap meets to stay alive, like the funniest part is we have people that complain to us about swap meets dying. They don't go to swap meets to set up and vend. The only way you're going to keep a swap meet alive is by vending.
Yeah.
So if you just go there to shop and you complain that it's dying, that's why it's dying, because everyone's just going there to shop. I think you need like Hershey's the prime example. It has turned into a parking lot with old dudes that old guys.
Not dudes just that old guys, just people in general.
People in general, they show up, they park, their vending space is now just a parking spot, and they walk around and shop. Well, no wonder the swap meet sucks, is because no one brings anything to sell, and it's just a row of pickup trucks with the dudes that are out shopping.
Yes.
So the only way to keep a swap meet alive is to bring stuff. You don't have to bring stuff every time.
Or you don't have to bring a lot of stuff. Just bring like
a table's worth.
Yeah.
Everyone has a table's worth of shit in their garage that they don't need, at least.
And even if you do, like you see some vendors at Hershey, they won't even man their booth. They'll put a little jar down, or they'll put a sign that says "Drop the money in my pickup truck," and at least they put a tarp. Even if it's $10 items, you're participating in the swap meet.
Kurt behind us at Hershey, he is never at his swap space. We see him at lunchtime and the evening, and he sells a ton of stuff.
Because he just leaves it.
It's so wild.
Or even if you're just like, we're the same way. The first couple of days of the swap meet, we're all running around trying to find a deal and the best stuff. And then even if you just, the last 2 days of the swap meet, you stick around and you sell some stuff, at least you're participating for a couple of days. You don't have to be there on on setup day selling or the first 3 hours of the swap meet, but you can. So I think that's important. I think I see a lot of the resellers and younger people that are in our age group at swap meets, and I pass them. You're walking the rows and we're all hunting for the same stuff, looking for a deal or, resell or whatever, or keep. I know, oh man, this swap meet sucks. It's terrible. I didn't find anything, blah, 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 blah. But then they leave, the first hour of the swap meet, they're already gone and on their way home. And so you're not participating in the swap meet.
Sign dudes.
Yeah,
Carlisle. Spring Carlisle, all the sign dudes will be gone by Wednesday. They come, they set up a little bit Wednesday, then they pack up and leave. They run around like maniacs Monday and Tuesday, buying stuff. They sell a little bit Wednesday, then they pack up and leave.
Yeah, so I think if you participate in the swap meet or you participate in the hobby, it's going to help it grow. So that's what I started doing before we got serious with selling for IronTrap. Like I would go and I would still run around the first day or two of the swap meet, or half the day I would be walking the swap meet, and at lunchtime I'll come back and I'll hang out the rest of the day and sell. Like at least I was there, I was selling some stuff. I wasn't trying as hard to sell, but at least I was open and selling some stuff. So I think that's, you got to participate in order for it to grow. And I always remind people when they complain about that, it's like, the old guys that you're looking to buy stuff from, they're going to be gone eventually, and we're going to be the old guys. So once all the old guys are gone selling that you're trying to score a deal from, there's going to be nothing to buy because no one's going to show up. So let's start bringing stuff out ourselves to sell. And, so participation is important in swap meets, especially the big ones. But it's been cool to see, though, I've been noticing small little independent swap meets popping up, especially during COVID and post-COVID. You're seeing, like I see it in California a bunch where some guys will get together and have their own little swap meet, and they just do like a kind of, not impromptu, but they'll just like, hey, next month we're doing the XYZ swap meet at our, at our whatever club, the insert parking lot here, and they'll do a swap meet, and it's like not huge, but it's all guys selling the same type of stuff, and they have a good time. So like, again, back to the like smaller, independent type stuff, you're seeing a little more of that. So that's cool. I like to see that. I've always dabbled with the idea of doing something like that here in one of the neighboring parking lots for the businesses that are around here, renting a lot, but I'm just not organized enough to.
Not enough time involved.
Yeah. So
since we are on the topic of Carlisle, that is next week. You're watching this on Sunday. Mm-hmm. It is next week. We will be there Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. Our spaces are K1 to K3. We're right by Gate 1.
Yep.
Stop in and see us. We'll have all kinds. I have the trailer packed full of a lot of stuff. We have a wide assortment of things. But
advertising and speed equipment, we are not short on right now.
Yes, a lot. We'll have a lot of everything. But Steve will be there in the booth. Matt and I will be walking around.
In the flesh.
Yes, you can ask him all the questions we did not cover in the podcast.
Or you should ask him the same questions again. Just
bug him, please. He's sitting there doing nothing. Entertain Steve all day.
Keep him busy.
Yes. But we'll be there walking around. Charlotte's, if you're watching this after Charlotte, we're actually leaving literally tomorrow morning to drive south. So there's springs upon us. There's swap meets every weekend from this weekend. Actually, 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, it's been going and at least on the East Coast, we've been having an array of swap meets almost every weekend since the beginning of March.
Basically, March to November, it's just swap meets. There's one probably within a 4-hour radius. There's probably one every weekend, which we're very fortunate with in this area.
It gets to be a lot.
It's maddening. But speaking of fun things, you're thinking about going to Maine.
Yeah, that's the same idea. I've been trying to get better about going to some more events. I am a flaky person by nature, so I will randomly decide not to do something last minute. So that's why if you've ever tried to get us to commit to doing your event, and I am shy away from
Matt. Not we,
yeah,
Matt.
Me. I shy away from it because I just tend to be flaky. So trying to be better about some shows that look neat or interesting that I haven't been to, and just forcing myself to go because the Relics Riot is a great example of a show that I've looked at over the years, looked like a good time, type of people and cars I like, never went. We kind of went because the Gilmore paid me to do some stuff at the museum, and that was my first time going, and then now we just go because it's a cool show. So there is the Vintage Drags in Maine that this old hot rod Mike is involved in, and a bunch of guys in his club and friends. They've been putting on an event that's in May. I think it's over
Memorial Day weekend.
And it looks like a great time. They're doing vintage drag races there, nostalgia drag races. From everything I could see, it's back to that same idea that we were talking about, where it was like, I don't hear people talk about this guy won or whatever. It's more people just like, I had a great time. I ran against my friends, and we did 10 passes, and it was a good time. They're doing like a swap meet. You could camp at the track. There's all kinds of like, it just seems like a good time. And whether you're a drag racer or you just like going and hanging out, seems like a good time. So I've been thinking about going to that. I think last year with doing Australia and a bunch of other stuff, I just couldn't muster.
I think we just got back from the Pacific Northwest as well.
Pacific Northwest. So I'm thinking about, I'm going to maybe try and go this year. I don't want to commit to anything, but I was thinking about just going up, maybe bringing some parts, setting some stuff up, bring a car, hang out, just drive around for the weekend and just have a good time. And then, you know, and that's the stuff that like we don't really film. Like people have asked us, like, why aren't you filming at this event or this whatever? Like I like going to events and
it's nice to be normal.
Yeah, just as much as our life revolves around doing social media and documenting what we do, I kind of hate it sometimes. So I like to just go to an event or go and do something and not film it. We'll get comments on social media like, I'll post a picture that I was driving a car. I'm like, I can't wait to see the video. And I'll comment and be like, there's no video. What? They cannot. I don't like documenting every second of my life. I like enjoying the hobby. So that would be an event that I'd like to just go as a normal person, show up, put some stuff out on a table, have a car, drive around, hang out, whatever. So I'm thinking about hitting that event.
It's hard to commit to stuff because we get phone calls. It's like, I got a property with 10 buildings filled with stuff. Can you come on Memorial Day weekend? I'm like, well, I guess I was going to go to the drags, but this sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, or it's like you need to come or we're going to have an auction or whatever.
Or it's going to scrap.
Whatever the deal is. So that event looks pretty good.
We might be there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to try and go. So there's some events like that going on. The Gasket Goons, which is a local show to us that's usually in the fall, that is, again, another one of these events with the hobby changing. That event is a one-day event, huge. We've done a couple of videos on it. It's huge for a one-day show in this area. They're putting on a early summer show, for lack of a better.
It's technically still, I think they call it spring, but it's like June 7th or 8th.
Yeah, so they're having an event at the Macungie Park where the Wheels of Time show is. There's a bunch of car events that are at this park. And they're doing a hot rod like spring bash type thing with the same feel as they do with their other events, which is very much like a party. There's bands playing, you know, people are hanging out, all that kind of stuff. And it's more about the hanging out with people and all of that stuff than it is about what awards and whatever. So that'll be kind of neat. I'm kind of excited to see how that does. It's in our backyard, so that's, of course, pretty cool. Jack and his club do a great job setting up. So if you've ever been to the fall Gasket Goon show and you enjoyed it, the spring event is going to be very much the same. And I'm going to say that the venue is better. It's a little easier to get in and out of there.
A little easier to find.
To find everything. So I think it'll be, if it all works out, it'll be good. Now it is, again, with putting on any show, it butts up against like a Good Guy show in Delaware that just started. But like talking with a lot of people, there's a lot of people, like I said earlier, that aren't into the Good Guy Stinger, the huge, ridiculous, big shows for the, that stuff. So I think there's going to be a huge crowd of people who are just going to go to the Gasket Goons or any of these events that are smaller because that's what you're looking for. So that'll be cool. And I don't know what else. There's
so many events.
But there's been a bunch that have popped up. But I think back to the talking about the hobby and what's going on with it and all that different stuff. I am seeing a lot more people that are becoming, you see it on Facebook groups and different forums and stuff, amazingly Facebook groups, where you're finding people are inheriting or getting left or whatever their father's or grandfather's antique car. They were not remotely into the hobby at all, and then they get this car and there's like this renewed interest, and you'll see these posts of like, you know, my father passed away, we're cleaning out his farm, we found his old car that he built when he was in high school, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. And they're asking questions from a group of people that are into it, and then suddenly you're seeing them get interested because everybody's excited. It happens all the time where I'm like super jealous. They're like, oh, my dad built this 32 3-window in 58 and he passed away and we just pulled out of the garage. I'm thinking about doing something with it. And like everybody's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they didn't probably think it was that exciting until everybody on the internet's losing their minds.
Exactly.
So that's kind of cool. And you're seeing a lot more of that. So I think you're seeing people enter the hobby just because they have to go through and clean out their family members' stuff, and then hopefully they become appreciative of it and they keep it. And
I think that the information is easier to find on the internet. I think that's happening more than it has in the past, where people are just like, I don't know what to do with this old thing. We'll just sell it to someone else that knows what. Now that you can just Google all the information you need, they're like, oh, I can find parts for it. We can find all the information, how to fix it, that kind of stuff.
And we've gotten, I can't even count how many times we've gotten emails, phone calls, or we've been in an estate buying stuff or cars, and we're like talking the person into keeping this car item. And we're like, they call us and they say, oh, my father died, I have this whatever. I don't know what to do with it. Would you guys be interested? And they tell me the whole story. I'm like, you should keep that car. Like, that was your parents dated in that car and have had that car since their whole entire life, whether you remember them driving it. Like, it's a family heirloom. You should keep it. I'd love to own your car.
We're terrible business people. We're doing the opposite of what we should.
We've done it a lot at estates where I'm just like, I really don't want to buy this because like you tell me this whole story, I'm tearing up. I don't even know you, and I'm tearing up because it's so important to the history of your family. You should keep it. And like, so that's like the stuff even on Facebook groups. You're seeing people trying to like talk to them like, you should keep this car. You should or like they're trying to talk them into like, I found this car. I think I'm going to restore this old hot rod my grandfather built in high school, or he came back from World War II and he built this car and blah 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 blah, and it's an old hot. I think I'm going to restore it to original. It's like, no,
keep it as it was.
Keep it as it was, or redo it how he did it back then. Like your grandfather didn't restore the car back then. Keep it how it was. So like we're getting a lot of those or emails, and we're just telling people like, you should just like think before you part this car out or cut it up or do whatever. Like think about it. And like we've been at estates where the family's trying to figure out what to sell and this and that, and they're hem and hawing. I'm like, you should sell all this crap and keep this car, and the money you make, you should put this car back on the road and keep it forever and pass it down the family. The Beasley estate with the old stuff was a perfect example. Like we went in there. The first time I went there and looked at everything, they had the Model A Roadster he had his whole life and was literally the center of his life, his whole life. And I'm talking to the son, and there's that engine there, that blown Olds behind Mike, was sitting on a stand, and all these parts, and we're talking money and talking the parts and the stuff, and he was hung up on keeping that engine. And I'm like, but they're also saying, like, I don't know if I have any money to build another car or a place, or I'm like, stop them. I'm like, why? You have the car. The car is sitting right next to you. Your dad's Roadster is the car. A, it's the most badass Olds-powered Roadster on the freaking planet. Like, it's just wild. And B, like, whatever you build isn't going to replace or be better than that. Your dad's Roadster is going to be it for the rest of your life. And that's the car you should focus on. And you don't, like, if you're not into collecting all these cars, there's no reason to have it. So, like, you try it, like, we plead with people sometimes, like, don't, like, save this or do something with this. I know this one's more rough than the other one, like, but this is the one that has ties to history to your family. And, if you learn anything about our channel, that's what we're so passionate about, is the history of these old hot rods or these old cars. And whether it's stock or it's a hot rod, like, if your family has had the car or your father obsessed over this vehicle for his whole life. I think you owe it to him to try and that's important to people, that the right people end up with this stuff. So if there's a certain car that, I think it's important. So we're seeing a lot more of that people are going to the internet and looking for what should we do. And I think I've seen a number of instances on different places where people are persuaded to keep the car and do something with it. And I just think it's so cool. I've been running into a lot more in my traveling of people that own cars that were their family members. Yeah. So like a guy will have a car and he's like, this was my uncle's car that he built back in the day, blah, blah, blah. I got it back on the road and I'm just driving it. When I was in Australia, the car that I picked for my award at the Australian Street Rod Nationals was not the nicest car there. It was not the most wild car there, but it was a 32 Roadster. I almost missed it, actually. Someone came over to me, and I believe her name's Joanne. I apologize if I've messed up her name. Now, I should know, we're Facebook friends.
Yeah.
Somebody came to me and said, there's a car like way out in the back of the field. I don't know if you saw it. It's just like you guys like. It's perfectly shitty, whatever the person told me. And maybe it was somebody in her club. And I walked all the way out, saw the car, and was like, she wasn't even there. I'm like, this is the fucking car, man.
Yeah.
This is it. It's like, and then like they only told me tidbits about the car. And then she came, and it's like, my dad drove this to the first Australian Street Rod Nationals. He's drag raced it all. It's been like 10 different colors. This car's been in my family and around me since I was a child, blah, blah, blah. She's telling me all this stuff, and I'm like, this is like the dream. And she's driving the car. She's taking it all over the place, enjoying the show. And just like, it was just badass. And I'm like, this is the car. And like, when I did the awards, I was like, this is the best car in this whole entire place. If you were probably like,
this guy's a dick.
This American asshole. He's so a fucking idiot. But really, it was like, to me, it was the best car there because it was the OG. It's a 32 Roadster channeled, and it's with Australian history. It's not a car that somebody in Australia is trying to emulate the Rolling Bones style. There's a lot of that stuff where you're seeing people trying to emulate this is it. It's the real thing. It's a little kooky because it was built back in the day and then people didn't have Instagram to see what was cool. So that's awesome. So we're seeing so much of that, and I love it that it's like multi-generational cars that are coming. And I'm a little jealous because my father or grandfather weren't they didn't build something like that, unfortunately. I mean, they had cars, but not like that. So like any of those people.
My grandfather built all kinds of cool shit in the 40s and 50s, but he sold stuff to pay for the next stuff. So there's a front engine dragster somewhere in PA that my grandfather helped build that I need to track down one of these days. But like my family, then no one kept everything. They sold it to buy the next thing and then sold that to buy the next thing. So I wish he would have kept something, but that's just how life is, unfortunately. You have to sell things to keep moving to get into the next car. So I wish he would have kept something, but
that's why I try and explain to people how special that your whatever family member kept this car through all these stages of life. And how many people do have situations like yours where it's
we see it on Facebook all the time. People post photos of this is my dad's car. He sold it in 70. Here's photos of it. I'm trying to track down figure out where it is. I want to buy it. So, I mean, there's posts like that every day in the Facebook groups. It's wild.
And I think that's awesome that stuff is much more, people are respecting and more interested in the history of cars that, that their family members or whatever had.
Definitely.
It's very exciting. So, obviously it's relevant to our interests, so we're excited about it. But it's neat to start seeing more people as a whole taking an interest to that, and that's a new little pocket of the hobby, I would say, because you didn't see people. I'm sure people were trying to track down their whatever car, but these cars have been restored and built and whatever so many times over that now with social media, people are like, oh, I might be able to find a car that was whatever, because you can reach millions of people just by sharing a post versus putting an ad in Hemmings or the newspaper. Now people are trying to find this old car, and you're starting to see it. I know where that car is, or I knew the guy that bought that car. Let me help you. And So that's awesome that there's this pocket of people finding
Internet sleuthing of finding cars.
Yeah, it's fun. I love it.
Yeah.
Sleuthing. So what do you think about young people getting into the car hobby? Is there more people, from what you're seeing, is there less people getting into it, or what do you see like when we go to shows or talk to people or whatever?
It's tough. I think it's harder than ever for kids to get exposed at school and stuff, but social media makes it easier for them to be exposed to it. Like school, there's not shop classes and stuff like that as much, but on the internet, there's ways for kids to be brought into just the car hobby in general. There's a ton of YouTubers, not us doing car stuff. There's a million YouTubers just doing car stuff in general, whether it's imports, drifting, drag racing. I think the car hobby in general is bigger than ever. There's just much more facets of it that there may not be as many people into our little small sect than there's ever been. But I think there's a lot more young kids getting into car stuff. They're just, say, into imports or into drag racing, which our hobby isn't necessarily as much. It doesn't transfer over as well to this. But I think the car hobby in general with young kids is huge. It's just we're in this little tiny. We have blinders on, looking at what we're involved in, not seeing all the other things going on. Not us, other people, I should say.
Yeah, I think some of the older people we talk to they look so negatively upon somebody doing a car that isn't a American antique car. So, like Mike's mentioning, there's now so many other types of cars or styles of cars that you can get into. I don't think you should be upset or think that the hobby's dying. I've found that it's a gateway, whether you get, and I'm a good example. I got into German cars when I was younger.
I was into imports.
Yeah, like I liked hot rods and antique American cars, but like I didn't know how to get into it. I didn't know who to talk to. I would see those cars around, but I just didn't know how to get into the hobby exactly, or get something cheap, whatever. And back to what Mike's saying, like now with social media being so big, that's a great, very satisfying to me thing is when we meet guys and gals that are a lot younger than us that are like, I watch your channel. Like I didn't even, I used to be into
even people that are like in their 30s and 40s. They're like, I was into muscle cars and then I found your channel and I love it. And now I'm building a Model A or I'm building a 32.
So the social media lets you dip your toe in because you can just casually scroll or go down the rabbit hole of looking at people's accounts and find stuff that you like, or social media is a little scary in that it'll show you things that you're like, how does it know that? But in the same breath, it's also sometimes kind of cool because you'll suggest a post of a cool car or something and you just go down the rabbit hole. So I think young people are very much getting into it. I think I would say yes, it's true that I'm sure the percentage of young people that are into doing mechanical things with their hands or cars is probably smaller because there wasn't anything else to do in 1957.
And everyone had to take shop class.
Yeah,
so everyone was brought into that class and shown it.
And it was what was cool before video games and all this skateboarding and everything else. If you go back, there's all these things, these hobbies that were created that young people can get into. So, I mean, you just look at before skateboarding and BMX and extreme sports, that was a whole sect of people that probably would have been hot rodders.
Yeah.
Or racers because there was nothing else. So now you got that, you got video games, you got all these other hobbies you can get into as a young person that it's taken a piece of the pie. But I think in the end, you're seeing a lot of people, they come back to cars. And I see a lot of people that I knew when I was younger that were not into cars or motorcycles or whatever, and they were skateboarders, BMXers, rollerbladers, whatever, and they weren't even, like I was into cars even while I was doing BMX, but I wasn't, but I had a lot of friends that weren't. And you fast forward and you catch up with them like 20 years later, and the guy's now got a a collector car. And you're like, I didn't know you were into cars. Yeah, I don't know. My dad had a Camaro, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to get one, and whatever. So your people come back to it. So I don't think anybody should be mad that young people aren't going to Hershey. Just be happy that they're into cars in general.
Yeah, I say it to people all the time. Yeah. Rat rods are not something that we're super cool with, but anything involving cars is good for the car hobby. Mm-hmm. I may not be into it, but it's good. People being into cars is good for the car hobby in general, or trucks. Anything automotive is great for the hobby.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should. So I think people, back to having their blinders on, they're upset because they go to Hershey, not as big as it was in 1972. Got it. But if you go anywhere else in the world, go to another event, go to a drag and drive event, and there's like thousands.
That's like the biggest thing going on right now.
Yeah, like you go to those events, there's tons of people there and into it.
And there's a ton of old hot rods. There's a lot of dudes that are racing Model A's and 32s and that kind of stuff. They're not nostalgia, but they're drag racing them, driving them 1,000 miles in a week, and drag racing them at every event. Just the things are changing and morphing, and people they're used to this specific thing done this specific way, and it's no longer done that way. And they're like, well, why doesn't everyone want to do what I want to do this specific way that it's been done for 50 years?
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be upset about that. That's just a matter of, again, perspective. That's going to be the key word with this. It's all your perspective and what you're looking at and how you are, if you have your blinders on, you're not going to see that. And older people not being maybe on social media that come up to us at events and say these types of things, they aren't really on social media. They're not really aware of all these other things that are going on.
And we're at Hershey or Carlisle on a weekday when the kids are at school.
Yeah.
So why aren't there kids here? I don't know. They're in school.
All the events. Yeah, antique car events, for whatever reason, you have to be like able to have a flexible work schedule or be self-employed because the stuff's always on weekdays.
Yeah.
That's why we had to start our own thing.
Exactly.
So we could hang out with the old guys at events. But so yeah, that's kind of our take.
I think we beat this horse to death.
Yeah, we did a good job, I think, of covering a lot of this. Hopefully that gives you a little take on it. Definitely, can you do it in the podcast?
No, there's no comments. But if you think we missed anything, head to YouTube, leave us a comment, and we'll continue the discussion there.
I'd love to hear other people's take on it, especially positive takes on something where, about young people or something with the hobby or whatever. I think it would be interesting to hear that in the comments. And we usually have pretty good discussion with guys and gals talking in the comments. So I'd love to hear your take on it, what you think about it, or if you have a good experience or a bad experience, but like especially good ones of young people or, what you think of what's going on with the hobby. That would be really exciting. Speaking of, and before we wrap up, speaking of the hobby and things that got you into the hobby. So you guys may remember we talked about in one of our podcasts, our wrap up we got Grand National Roadster Show.
Right.
We talked about hanging out with some internet friends that we got to meet and actually hang out with in person when we were out in California. So we hung out with Pierre and Lucky and their crew of friends. Just a couple nights, just hang out in the garage.
Every night.
Yeah. Just hang out in the garage, going to dinner or whatever. And it was pretty cool. One of the first things I said to Pierre when we were hanging out was I made a point. I always wanted to say it to him was that like IronTrap exists because of you, like kind of, because I was watching Mad Fabricators and all that stuff even before I really had a lot of American cars or even traditional hot rods, and I had like a street rodded. I was building that. Anyways, I was not building a traditional hot rod. I was watching the Mad Fabricator stuff. I was, again, using the internet and sleuthing and learning and watching. And Mad Fabricators and all the stuff he did and what was going on with the revival of traditional hot rods, I was mesmerized by. But again, I like living where we lived. I didn't really, the stuff was Austin and California, and I just didn't pursue it. But anyways, as things progressed and we grew what we did, like seeing how he was doing Mad Fabricators and all that was super inspiring to me. And like we took our spin on it and made what we do, which is different than what he does. And we created a YouTube channel and did all this stuff. And that's kind of like it all came from him. So Pierre was super cool to hang out with him and do all that stuff. So I was really satisfied to tell him that, like, to his face, and say, like, dude, like, we are, what we're doing is kind of because of you partially, or was inspired by. So, unfortunately, Pierre recently had some health stuff. He had a heart attack, and or he had a blockage.
It was 2 weekends ago?
2 weekends ago, and he is not an old person, so to speak. And he, Lucky posted on, if you don't do the social media thing, his good bud, Lucky Burton, commented and said, hey, like, this is what's going on. And Pierre had this problem, and he's in the hospital. He looks like he's going to be okay, blah, blah, blah. All of that. The whole internet, everybody, it's reading the comments was super, super cool. Because, like, we only got to meet and hang out in person with Pierre one time. I said it in the last podcast. It felt like it was dudes that, like, we have known for, at least for me, I just felt like these were dudes I've known for my whole life.
Yeah.
Like, same sarcasm, just hanging out, whatever. And it seemed like in the comments, like, everybody, he's like one of those dudes that everybody's like.
Friend to everyone.
Friend to everyone, always positive, inspired a lot of people, all this stuff. So, really kind of scary that all happens. So, I definitely want to mention in this, if you aren't aware or you've never done it, make sure you watch a Bad Fabricators video on Tubi. You can watch it.
Yep.
But most importantly, if you've ever watched a video or been inspired by any sort of content that Pierre has put out, make sure he has. We could drop a
I'll
link.
put it in the description of the podcast and the video.
Yeah, there's a GoFundMe for Piero. I don't do the asking. That we never ask for money or sponsorship or any of that stuff. Piero is a self-employed person, much like us, having a major heart issue and everything going on with American healthcare being terrible, and even if you have health insurance, you still can go bankrupt.
Yeah.
If you can give anything, go to the GoFundMe, help him out. I immediately made a point to give some money because even if it's $10, doesn't matter. It's helpful. Us as a community can help someone like him out. He definitely is like, there's a piece of hot rodding history that he's inspired a lot of people, and it's very important that he has gotten a lot of people exposed to this and given a lot of entertainment. So he texting with him, he's like, oh, I'm watching your videos while I'm in the hospital. It's really helping me through all this. Like, his videos have helped. When I worked a 9-to-5 job in an office on my lunch break for a long time, I was watching Mad Fabricator videos, and every piece of content he was putting out that I could get my hands on. So it's all come full circle. So we wanted to mention that. Definitely, if you can, help him out. This is a legit thing, super scary, and hopefully it's quick that he can be back kicking ass, putting out content, traveling around, and just having a good time. So that's my little blurb I wanted to put there. It's important to us. It would mean the world to me if you went and just gave even a small donation to Piero in his GoFundMe. So click that, help him out. It's the least we can do for somebody that's been helping out the hobby for quite a long time.
Definitely.
So that's our little podcast here. Thank you guys for listening, watching, whatever. We're going to be doing some interviews and some traveling this spring, summer. So we're going to be doing some interesting characters that we're going to do some different interviews with. It'll be really, really fun. So thanks, guys, for watching. Appreciate it. And drop a comment down below. What do you think of the status of the hobby? We do like to hear it. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.